Hello everybody! You may have heard that Microsoft now supports Linux graphics and Systemd on Windows 10. So this is a video to help you go through those steps, and as a bonus it's also the install of JupyterLab properly. So if you're new to all this, what you really want to do if you're just getting started, make sure you've run a current Windows update. You go into settings, you go into Windows Update. If there's an early release preview waiting, install it by the time of this video. In time, it'll just be part of normal Windows, but for now, you've got to make sure you have the early advanced feature offerings. Accept it. It may have you reboot, and then after it's done, one extra little step, you're going to have to go into PowerShell, especially if you've had Windows Subsystem for Linux, WSL, installed before. So you have to do WSL space minus minus update. And that'll replace your older WSL with a new version, the one that's actually offered in the Microsoft Store now. So just so that you have the full picture, you should know that if you go into the store, you can now actually find Windows Subsystem for Linux here, which is kind of a big deal, which means it's managed now and auto-updated underneath of you, and the updates will come rolling to you much more easily. So that is Windows Subsystem for Linux. There's a little blue penguin, right? So you don't have to go through the web store here, but and it's saying install as if I don't have it. I do have it installed, but that's full disclosure on kind of the way it works now. So you want to get those graphics, you want to get Systemd. What do you do? So I would suggest to get your first reboot out of the way. After you have done those little steps I showed you, run PowerShell one more time with WSL space minus minus install, and that will put a version of Ubuntu on your machine, and it'll get you past your final reboot. You might be up to 3 reboots by this time, so it's really changing your system, so you got to cut them some slack. Normally I am very opposed to all these reboots, but to get Linux, it's worth 3 reboots of your Windows system. So now, what next? This is the magic. This is the pixie dust. I have been working on a script. It's been mostly for Linux containers because Windows Subsystem for Linux was inadequate without having, well, graphics on Windows 10. It was reserved for Windows 11 only, and Systemd in the later days for Windows 11 only as well. So second-class citizen, I'm like, hey, Microsoft, I'll use my own Linux under WSL, but I sort of whitewash it. Don't have to do that anymore. So open a web browser, go to mikelev.in/ux. Again, that's Mike Levinix, and it'll auto forward you to this page here on GitHub, which is the install script for a different Ubuntu 20.04. Really, it's the same, but it'll reinstall it with a bunch of little modifications that will make graphics and everything really easy. Otherwise, you might end up struggling a bit with these meta files and stuff. So you right-click right on your desktop, new text document. Now, I've been using install.bat, but I've renamed the repo to drinkme.bat. You can name it whatever you want, so long as it's got a BAT extension. Answer yes, because it changes its file type. You get those little gears. If you don't get the gears, your file extensions are being hidden. You edit that file, pop in the script, save it, close it, and just double click it. You really don't even need admin rights or anything. And this lets you get a little preview or a little bit of the philosophy behind this, right? So they want you going obsolete. Artists, musicians, athletes forever improve because their tools don't change every 2 to 5 years, letting them focus on craftsmanship. We in tech don't have that privilege because of relentless upgrade cycles and forced obsolescence, because you must rebuy and retrain to feed company profit. So future-proof yourself. There is a better way, and Microsoft had to include it in order to maintain credibility as a developer platform. Of course, we're talking about Linux. You can now get the best of both worlds. This can be the beginning of a wonderful journey into the timeless tools of Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, starting with a proper install of JupyterLab, right? So you hit enter. Deactivated the screen by moving it around, so sometimes you need to get your interactivity back by clicking in the screen. The path of eventual freedom from Windows and proprietary stuff is an excellent choice. This script will install Linux under the Windows subsystem and use it to host JupyterLab, accessible through your Windows browser at localhost 8888. If you have to run Jupyter anyway, to run Python, why not do it in a way that sets you on a better path in life? And I've got a little picture here, kind of what goes on. It's prompt 2 of 3. Here's our third one. And I give a big warning because this will uninstall any previous Ubuntu 20.04 under WSL. If you've done WSL stuff and you're running my script, this will delete it, so beware. A new 20.04 will be installed. Oh, to host LXD containers, I gotta change that text, but in the future, that'll be true again. All other Linuxes running under WSL are left untouched. A login icon will be created where you run the script. Double-clicking it will start JupyterLab and open a terminal window. The terminal, aka shell or command line, can be immediately closed and you can just use Jupyter as you would with Anaconda or desktop. But the Jupyter server and the entire Linux system it's running under can also be reached through the terminal using the screen command. All right, that's the preface to all this. One more enter and you're going down the rabbit hole. This first step is pulling down a Ubuntu image from Microsoft. This is the Microsoft prepared ones. It's no longer LXD land, right? So all my previous videos about LXD, we're taking that and we're putting it aside for a moment. This is all going to be native under WSL, the first level of Linux accessible in Windows, instead of the second level down, which is what I had been doing in the past. Yeah, okay, so after that's done, this is a sudo apt update, which is a pretty fast process. And then we get to the sudo apt upgrade, which is a slightly longer process. So let me go into my Kindle. Pull up Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Oh, yeah, here's that mouse tail. Down, down, down. There was nothing else to do, so Alice soon began talking again. Dinah will miss me very much tonight, I should think. Dinah was the cat. I hope they'll remember her saucer of milk at tea time. Dinah, my dear, I wish you were down here with me. There are no mice in the air, I'm afraid, but you might catch a bat, and that's very like a mouse, you know. But do cats eat bats? I wonder. And here Alice began to get rather sleepy and went on saying to herself in a dreamy sort of way, do cats eat bats? Do cats eat bats? And sometimes do bats eat cats? For you see, as she couldn't answer either question, it didn't matter very much which way she put it. She felt that she was dozing off and had just begun a dream that she was walking hand in hand with Dinah and saying to her very earnestly, now, Dinah, tell me the truth. Did you ever eat a bat? When suddenly, thump, thump, down she came upon a heap of sticks and dry leaves, and the fall was over. Well, our fall is only 50% of the way through. I guess I started too late, the whole marmalade thing. I'm considering of inserting a picture of a jar of marmalade so that as I'm doing future demos in here, I can read the intro to Alice and you see the marmalade scroll by while she reaches out to have some and sees that the jar is empty and then carefully puts it back in the cupboard as she's falling. So this is by far the longest step. Whether you use my script or not, you're going to have to update your Linux. I'm really not adding any overhead. But, you know, once Ubuntu is installed, you do sudo apt update, pulls down a repository, a database of all available software in the Ubuntu software repo. And then you do sudo apt upgrade, and it upgrades all the components on your Linux that have newer versions available out there in the repo. It's pretty much the same thing as doing a Windows update after a fresh Windows install. You kind of can't get away from it, and it is by far the longest step in the procedure. When we get up to installing the Linux version of Chrome, that gives it a run for its money, but you'll see that in a moment. And you see these system require messages coming up, system restart required messages coming up. That's not the only one. There will be a few of those, but I defer it and defer it and defer it to the very end, and then I do one Linux restart. It's not even a reboot of Windows, right? You can do system restarts on your Linux without rebooting your whole Windows system. So that's very convenient for like server building install scripts. This is actually quite interesting. Why Windows? Well, honestly, it's because of momentum and market forces and the fact that Microsoft offers really great laptops at a really great price, and everyone else's laptops have Windows pre-installed for the most part, and it's hard to get away from it. And instead of taking it upon yourself to like install some other, here we are installing Python 3.11. In case you were wondering, you can kick the tires of the very latest Python now with this install script. That's another side benefit. I talk about it being the right way to install JupyterLab, but of course JupyterLab requires Python, and you usually get stuck with whatever version JupyterLab is up to and bundles with it, 3.8, 3.9. But you don't have to wait. JupyterLab can be configured with any version of Python you've got on your machine. It's just not normally done because everyone does the Anaconda install or the JupyterDesktop install, which just doesn't make it easy. Here, it's super duper easy. I do it for you in the back end, such as it were. So these are a bunch of optional pip installs for a bunch of things that are here because I am a search engine optimizer and I automate browsers a lot for my work. So a lot of this Pypeteer stuff you see going on, that's because of that. I'm probably going to get Pypeteer out of it entirely. I'm moving entirely over to Microsoft Playwright. It's better on almost every front, except for the fact that I have some code I've written in the past in Pypeteer, so I need to still install it in order to run some of my old scripts. So once you get this thing built on your machine, walking through these same steps, you'll actually have a number of pip installed packages on your machine, of which JupyterLab is one of them, right? So I'm really just pip installing JupyterLab as a final step. So these are all kind of the optional ones. There's a file in there called requirements.txt, and whatever you put in there gets pip installed here. You can have it locally sitting next to your script. This is now the Google Chrome install. You'll see a lot of graphics-oriented things getting installed as it scrolls here, because it starts out, the whole Linux on Windows starts out with a fairly trimmed down version of Linux without any of the Linux desktop software, right? So a lot of people think about Linux as if it were an alternative desktop. Well, it's just not true. I mean, there are Linux desktops, but Desktops are just syntactic sugar. It's just, window dressing. And the real thing about Linux is, well, it's really the boot kernel. It's not even the command line, but the commands are the valuable portion, and the environment in which the commands exist, the terminal, the shell, the command line interface, what have you. And so Microsoft and Ubuntu and everyone can get away with shipping a very trimmed down, lightweight version of Linux until you need the graphics oriented stuff. And when you install something that uses graphics, blah, 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 all those graphics installs occur. And so that's a lot of what you're seeing there happening for Google Chrome. And it just finished the Google Chrome part of the install. It's now to the JupyterLab, and it's really close to the end. Once you see JupyterLab install, there's a few git clones at the end after that, just establishing the fact that I can git clone repos locally after this is done. And so I really set things up to be almost an SEO product. Honestly, this is an alternative to buying SEO products, because you can do so many things from JupyterLab, crawls and all kinds of lovely things. So JupyterLab is now installed. And in the last step, you will now see the cloning of repos out of GitHub. I do it. Oh, and there's the shutdown. It's back from the shutdown. There was a little Linux restart there because I had to update things to have the proper ACLs, access control lists, or else this wouldn't work. Because, boy, doing that step was one of the hardest right there. Done repo cloning. I cloned 2 little repos almost as a sample. I'll probably update or change. And there, it's done, right? You can now reach JupyterLab in a Windows browser at blah, 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 blah from Microsoft Edge. And I need to move this line above that because this won't work until this is done. Double click the icon Jupyter login created where you ran the script. So now there's this new icon that was created. But before I go and double click that icon, I will demonstrate to you how that has to be clicked now before JupyterLab is really running. I can go into Edge, and I can go to localhost 8888, and don't be worried that nothing can be reached at first. But all you do is you double click that new icon it gave you, and it logs into Linux, right? This is a Linux terminal. You're logged into it. It's Linux. And gives you some instructions. Visit that location for JupyterLab, or you can see what's running by typing screen-ls. Now, I'll save this for later because you can actually see Jupyter server running. But you can just close out of that now. You don't really need it running, and you do a refresh here. Now, for those familiar with the JupyterLab from other types of installs, take a look at this speed and performance. It's really just as fast or faster than the Anaconda or the Jupyter Desktop install. And there you have it. This is Python 3.11 in there. So I guess I can print Hello World in the world's easiest Hello World program, which is part of what is driving. I'm still stuck in old Python land. It's part of what's driving the popularity of Jupyter and Python. Look, this is just Hello World like this, just in case you didn't know that, right? You can just do Hello World in quotes. That's a JupyterLab thing more than a Python thing. But import, I don't know, was it sys.version 3.11. See, that's Python 3.11, just in case you were wondering. So you have all the lovely performance advantages, yet more performance advantages, because all the optimizations under Python 3.11 are speed and performance. And there you have it. That's Jupyter. You can close out of it. And here, I'll do a save here. Save notebook. You'll see that notebook appear down at the bottom here. And you can just close out of these things, and then you can go back in. Now I have an icon here that'll bring me into that as well, and I'll show you how to make that icon. It's pretty much the same thing as going to localhost 8888 on a browser, but it feels like a full screen app. And see, it comes back up exactly the way you left it. It's in memory in the background. Where is it in memory in the background? Well, Jupyter server is running silently and invisibly in the background through Linux, which is like part of the whole point here. So I'll go back into that terminal and just for your edification do screen-ls. And there it is. That's Jupyter running there. I could log into it, screen, reattach to Jupyter. And there's Jupyter Lab running in the background. Control A, D to get out of it, exit to close the terminal. But it's always running silently in the background and just as clean and efficient of a way as any other way you can install Jupyter. So if you need Jupyter, do it this way because it's so much better to be on a real Linux version of Jupyter than some convoluted Windows version. And just to hit that point home, you can hit New. You can open a terminal and see that is a Linux terminal there. See the forward slashes instead of the backslashes. Top. You can see the tasks that are running. And there's systemd, just to hit home for people who are here for, is it systemd? So you can do Linux scheduling and services. Well, there's your confirmation there. And if you wanted more confirmation, let's see, I'll Control C out of top, and I'll do systemctl, right? That wouldn't work unless that was systemd on there. And another trick is ps-o for formatting, com, and then 1 for PID1, and you can see systemd there. It would be init if it were not really systemd running. Oh, and graphics, right? So I'm just showing you Jupyter, right? So let's do a little graphics demonstration. We open that terminal again, and there's a couple of graphics I plug on here so that you can see that it's there. You can do XIs, right? There's those notorious little XIs that everyone uses to make sure that Linux graphics is working on Windows. I'll minimize that so you can see, yes, indeed, it's Windows. But it doesn't follow your pointer when your pointer is outside the box. That is some interesting insight as to how Microsoft implemented this. It's probably, security stuff going on. Similarly, there's no arrow snap. You can't arrow snap this to full screen or anything. That's a little bit annoying. And these widgets and stuff are so friggin' small, as is the pointer. I've got to look into that. And one more bit of graphics. I'll close out of XIs with a little X gadget. Bring back my terminal and go Google Chrome. Oh, but it's Linux Chrome. It's not your user account or whatever other complaints you want to make. No, this is Linux Chrome right here with my user account. It's using my user data. It's got my profile. That's how it has a dark screen in the background. Excuse me. And this is the thing I automate. And those repos that I cloned will control Google Chrome. It'll be able to launch it. Oh, wait, but can you launch it through Jupyter? And I guess I'll make that the last part of the demonstration, right? You're in a little Linux terminal here. Google Chrome. This is the Linux version of Chrome being launched from JupyterLab. The Linux version of JupyterLab running on Windows 10. There you have it. Isn't that a good demonstration? Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. And we'll get back to all the other happy stuff later, like LXD containers. I haven't given up on them. It just became too complex with all these moving parts, right? Because Linux graphics, systemd, and then I would have had to have done LXD containers, and then Linux graphics under LXD containers and systemd under LXD containers. So the moving parts just explodes. And I was doing that mostly in order to get this stuff on a whitewashed version of Linux, a non-Microsoft WSL Linux. But now that WSL is more or less catching up with the mainstream Linux world, the need for LXD is a little bit reduced. Not entirely, but for now, to get work done on a day-to-day basis, this will do just fine. Catch you later.